Hello, children. So, today we move on to the next lesson from the textbook Beehive. The next lesson is a poem which is titled The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. So, to give you a brief about the poet, Robert Frost was born in San Francisco, and Frost spent most of his adult life in rural New England, and his laconic language and emphasis on individualism in his poetry reflect this region. He attended the Dartmouth and Harvard but never earned a degree. And as a young man with a growing family, he attempted to write poetry while working on a farm or teaching in a school. American editors rejected his submitted poems. With considerable pluck, Frost moved his family to England in 1912, and the following year, a London publisher brought out his first book. After publishing a second book, Frost returned to America determined to win a reputation in his own country, which he gradually achieved. Now, he became one of the country's best loved poets, and unlike his contemporaries, Frost had chosen not to experiment with new verse forms but just to utilize the traditional patterns, or in his own words, he chose the old fashioned way to be new. So, despite all these surface cheerfulness and descriptive accuracy of his poems, he often presents a very dark, sober, or sad vision of life, and there is decidedly a thoughtful quality to his work. So, the poem that we're going to learn today, The Road Not Taken, is a quite well known poem which tells you about making choices and how these choices shape us. And though Frost has written it in a very simple language, but it is very insightful, and he gives you the very common ordinary experiences through his simple words. So now let's move on to our poem. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveller. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. So let's look at the first line. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood. The poet is starting his poem by stating that there are two roads in front of him which is diverged. Diverged means separated and took a different direction or split. Okay, so there was a diversion or a fork in the road ahead, and it was in a yellow wood. What do you mean by yellow wood? Yellow wood is nothing but it is the forest which has the decomposing leaves. So we could say that, with the description that it was a yellow wood, season of autumn, and the leaves have fallen off and it is in a decomposing stage, and the author is on his way to a certain destination. Now, what you must remember here is this poem was written in 1916, and therefore the mode of transportation was mostly by walking. You hardly had any cars or trucks or even carts, horse carriages for that matter. So most of the people used to walk to their destination. So, and therefore the roads are also not like the kind of roads that we have now, all the tarred roads or the tiled roads, but it was all the rough road that was ahead, and it was the walkway. So it was tiny road, and so it was more like a path than a road. But and he says how he's come to a point where there is a diversion in the road. And sorry, I could not travel both and be one traveler. So he says that, he wants to travel on both the roads at once, but since it is impossible for him to walk down both the roads at the same time, he has got nothing but to make a choice. He needs to choose between one of the road, and he says that he's sorry that he cannot travel both the roads. So which we can see that there's a sense of regret when he says the statement that I'm sorry I could not travel both. So he regrets that he cannot take both the roads at the same time. So, and he's confused as to which road to take because the road has split into two. So he does not know which path he has to choose. And since he's traveling by foot, he is standing at this intersection, and he's contemplating or thinking about what to do or which road to take. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. So he stood there for long, and he looked down the road to see where the road went, and he could only see till this place where the road took a bend or a curve, and around that bend there was an undergrowth. Undergrowth is a dense growth of plants and bushes, okay, and that kind of blocked his view, so he cannot see beyond this bend or a curve in the path, and he is thinking of what has to be done. So here we can think of few questions. Okay, now what does these two roads represent? Now these two roads represent the choices that a human being will have to make in his or her life. So at one point in our life, we'll come across a point where we will have to choose which path to take, and so we'll have many choices in front of us, and we'll have to choose one. And so what the poet is trying to do is he's trying to look and find out what is in front of him. So it's almost like we trying to find out what is in front of us, or what is in store for us in our future. Now, can we look and predict? No, we can't, isn't it? So you cannot really predict what our future is going to be, and we can only see a part of the path, or just probably the few steps that will lead us to our destination. So he's trying to find out what is there. So it's almost like how our life is. We come across situations where we'll have to make a choice, and we will try to see what is in front of us, but we may not be able to know what exactly happens there. Okay, then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. So after he looks down the road for a long time, the narrator or the speaker, he decides to take the other path, not the first path, but the second path. And he describes this road as, just as fair, which means that the road is just as good as the first one. And he's choosing between two roads. It's almost like, you're choosing your path to your future. For example, when we have to make a choice in our life, what happens is, now that you're in 9th standard, soon you'll be in 10th, and after that you'll have to make a choice. Now, what is the choice in front of you? You will have probably 3 or 4 options. You can either go for the science stream. Under the science stream itself, you have two or three options. Or you can go for the commerce stream, or you can go for the legal studies, or political science, either of that option. So you have multiple options in front of you. Now, whichever option you choose is actually going to lead to your future. So you have to make a very wise choice. So you might think that, okay, science, for those students who feel that, okay, science is a little tough, what you will think, okay, I might as well take commerce. What is there to study? Just some numbers. It is okay, I'll manage. And you might jump into commerce. Once you take the commerce group, that's when you realize the difficulties that particular option has. From the outside, it might look quite an easy walk compared to the science group. But once you enter that path, you will realize it is equally tough like the science path. Okay, if the science has got probably the experiments in the lab, similarly you will have the same for the commerce group also. It's just that you will not have a physical lab. You will have more of written work, you will have more of practical work, but again it is equally tough. So that's the problem with us. When we make a choice, we always go for the better path or the easier path we feel is easy, but only when we enter that path, we realize that no, it is not the same. Okay, and it is equally difficult, like the path that you had not chosen. Now, if you look here, he says he took the other road, which was as good as the first one, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. So he sees that, he's not sure about how this new path is going to be. it may be better than the commonly used path, and since it was grassy, that is, it is not used by people, that path has not been trodden by people, and it did not look worn out at all. Wanted where means it had not been used. So since it was grassy and it was not worn out, he felt that this particular path has got a better claim because it is not used much by others. Though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. So he's not able to make up his mind. Now he changes his mind once he starts taking the path. He changes his mind and he says that maybe both the paths are same. And when he says the passing there, he refers to people who had gone by that road, who has already taken that path. And he says that the people who passed on the other path, the path that he did not choose, might have worn it down equally to the path that he had taken. So he's like, from the outside when you look, one path looks very worn out, whereas the other path looks not worn out. But when he took the better claim, which he felt had a better claim, and he took that path, he found that is equally worn out like the first path. Okay. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. So, he again says that, both the paths are equal. And that particular morning, both the path looked equal to him because it is the morning time and the leaves had fallen overnight. So both the paths looked the same. So, and he is probably one of the first person to travel on that path on that particular day. So he is not able to understand which is used more and which is not used more. That is why he says, in leaves no step had trodden black. So the leaves are scattered down and it is not at all trodden black, means walked upon. It is not walked upon or walked over by much people. Okay, so I kept the first for another day. So he says that he regrets, he kind of is like thinking that, he says that he kept the first path for another day, that he'll come and take that path later. And now he's trying to justify himself, his choice of path, saying that he will come back and take the first path. Now that is not possible, isn't it? When you choose a path, there is no way you can come back. You make a choice, it's final. Now, as I said before, so if you choose to take the commerce or the humanities path, then there is no way that, for your degree or your post-graduation or for your higher studies, you can go for a science stream because you're not coming from a science background. You have science only till your 10th standard. Your 11th and 12th, you have chosen a different stream. So there is no way you can go, you decide that, okay, I'll go for my medicine or engineering after doing commerce in 12th, which is not really possible. And you cannot go back and study in 11th again. So that is what happens when we make a choice. When we keep one choice for another day, we cannot really come back and choose that path again. So that is why he says that, oh, I kept the first for another day. So it's almost like, an exclamation that tells that, the speaker is quite strong about his choice. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. So he says that, he hoped to come back and choose the first path, but try how much ever he could, he can never come back and take the first path because it is not practically possible. Now, as he says, way leads on to way, which means that one road can lead to another. That road will lead us to another destination. So we will end up quite far from where we had started. So that is why, that's what happens when you decide to go for, say, the commerce stream, then the choice in front of you is either go for your BCom or BBA or any of the management courses, or go for an art stream like history or literature. But there is no way that you can come back. Now, whichever path you choose, that will lead to another. Now, if you decide to go for BCom, then the next option in front of you is either MCom or Chartered Accountancy or even MBA for that matter. That will be the choice in front of you. You cannot really choose a different path. You will have to take a set path that is in front of you. So that is why he says that, one way, how way leads on to way. I doubted if I should ever come back. So he doubts. Sometimes what happens is, when we think that I can always try a different option later, we may not be able to do that, because sometimes our decisions will take us to some other decision or choice, and yet there will be many more in front of us, that it is quite impossible for us to come back and choose the path or choice that we had originally decided. Okay, maybe as a young child you might have decided that, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer, but maybe due to certain situation you might have to choose a different path, and your dream of being a lawyer might not get fulfilled. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. Now we have come to a future time. Now we saw the first three stanzas tell us or show us the situation where the poet is standing in front of the road which is diverged into two. Now in the last stanza we are in the future. Okay, we have come forward in life. We don't know where exactly it is or which age it is. So the poet says that he will be telling about his decision probably many years later, and he'll be narrating it with a sigh. Now the sigh can be a sigh of relief or a sigh of despair. We never know. Sigh of relief is like that he is happy with the choice that he made. Sigh of despair could be he's not happy with the choice he made. But we don't get to know what the sigh here means, because it can be both. So when he says ages and ages hence, he talks about the future. Okay, and he says that when the choice that we made is probably the choice that the poet made here is probably very important for his future, but he doesn't know as of now if he's going to be happy about it or not. If we take Frost's life, we can see that he was an American citizen, and he became popular in England. He tried publishing his works in America, but no one was ready to publish his work, and therefore he migrated to England, and it was there that he got his works published. And once he got his two of his works published there, he comes back to America and he establishes himself there. He gets his works published, because by then he had some publications in his name. So American publishers were also ready to publish his work. So this person didn't have a role model when he decided to take the adventurous path, or the path that was less traveled by others. Unlike his contemporaries, he didn't choose the path that his contemporaries took. He decided to take the adventurous path. He didn't have anyone to guide him. There were times where he was stuck and he had to choose which path to take. And he says, two roads diverged in a wood, and I. So he comes again. He says that it is almost a repetition of the first line of the poem. And he says that, he's reminding us what is important in this poem. That is the concept of choosing between two different paths. And he's letting us know what he's going to tell next is very important. I took the one less traveled by. So here the speaker is giving you his story and telling us that he took the road that was less traveled by others. Even though there was a hesitation in the line before, this decision or this declaration that he makes now, it can be either a decision or a declaration of triumph or regret, because it was not clear to us that, which was the path that was less traveled. And he just told us that, it looked less worn, but then both the roads were actually equal. So we don't know what exactly was there for him. But the last line in the poem, and that has made all the difference. Now, this particular line, at the first glance, it kind of gives us as the image that it's a triumph or a successful path. And the narrator himself took this path that not much people have traveled by, and it gave him success in life. But he does not say that, how successful it was. He wants the reader to read and understand this particular line in a positive sense. And the difference here could mean success or failure. Now, it's almost like, he says that it has made all the difference. Now, this we can read it in two ways. It can either be that path that he took, he's happy about it, or it was an utter failure for him. It can be both. But from where he is right now and looking down the path, as far as he could see, he cannot tell the future. And this particular stanza, we can say that this is what the speaker intends to tell us in the future. He is still standing in front of the road, which is diverged into two. The last stanza is what he would possibly tell you in the future. Now, he cannot say if it is going to give him a good future or a bad future. He just knows that whatever choice we make, that will make a big difference in our life. So it is a very strong message that the poet is trying to give you, that you should be very wise and careful while making choices out of the options that are in front of you, because your future depends upon the choice that you make today. Your decision will ultimately lead you to your future. So children, you have to be very wise and very careful when you make your choice. He is advising us to do something different, and he says that, as a poet, he says he was an adventurous man and he took risks in life which probably people wouldn't have taken. He was a teacher, he was a farmer, he had a steady profession in front of him. But he chose to be different, and he moved with his family all the way from United States to England to try his luck at poetry. So that was like the biggest risk that he took to get his work published in a land which was foreign to him. He did not get recognition in his own land. He chose to be different from his contemporaries, and he comes out successful. So he wants us to be adventurous in life, and he wants us to not just blindly follow the path that has already been trodden by others or taken by others. He wants you to take the path that is less traveled, the path which is adventurous and which has a better claim. With this we come to the end of the poem. Now we have few poetic devices or literary devices which is used in the poem by Frost. Okay, the same will be given in the notes, but I would like to explain some. Okay, now here one of the main poetic device used by Frost is symbolism. Symbolism is when you have to tell something, okay, you use symbols to narrate what you have to say. Okay, so here he has chosen two roads. He has chosen two roads as a symbol to represent the two or more choices that we have in our life. So to speak about the choices, he has used the symbol of a road. So you can underline two roads, and on the side of your textbook with a pencil you can write symbolism. Now we come to the next poetic device, which is anaphora. Anaphora is the use or the repetition of a word or a phrase at the beginning of successive clauses, which means that it is a repetition of a word. Now in this poem you have the word and. If you look in the first stanza, okay, the line 2, 3 and 4 begins with and. So the word and is repeated in those lines. So when there is a repetition of the same word in two or more lines, then it is known as an anaphora. Now the next poetic device is alliteration, which is the repetition of consonant sounds in consecutive words in the same line. For example, if we look at the second stanza, third line, wanted where. Wanted where, here the W sound or the verse sound is repeated. Okay, so when you have, sometimes there are rare cases where there is probably an article in between these two consecutive words, but usually the repetition of the consonant sounds in consecutive words in the same line, then it is alliteration. Okay, first example is want it where in second stanza, third line, last two words. Then the next one is third stanza, third line, first four. Again, the first sound is repeated, and in second stanza itself, though that is in between, that is the fourth line in second stanza. Though as for that, here though that, the sound is repeated. Okay, then the last poetic device used is repetition. What is repetition? Repetition means when there is something being repeated again and again, then that is known as repetition. Now here, if you see, it is two roads diverged in a yellow wood. Two roads diverged is used in stanza 1 and stanza 4. Okay, and again in stanza 4, ages and ages, the word ages is repeated. So this is an example of repetition. So these are the few poetic devices used in the poem The Road Not Taken. Okay, so I hope you have understood the poem. Okay children, thank you.